Sir, for making this lecture possible. Please take note of any questions and comments you have during the lecture, as they will be addressed by the professor at the end of the presentation. Without any further delay, please help me welcome the expert himself, Mohan Bhuvaneshwaran.
Very good afternoon to all of you. This is Dr. Mohan, as introduced. I welcome you. I take this privilege to welcome all of you for this webinar by DT Study Club. And I'm a dentist like you. I think you would have read my profile on the webpage. I'm basically a restorative dentist, belong to India. I belong to the southern part of India called Chennai, which is very rich in cultural heritage and long beaches, and of course, hot place on earth. This is exactly where I'm now going live from my hospital where I practice, and my small training center. This is exactly where I'm sitting down and doing the live webinar. Going on to the topic for the day, it is the restorative materials 150 years later, a new alternative to silver amalgam. This webinar would go on for almost an hour from now, and after the webinar is over, I would love to take up some questions if you have any, and then I would love to answer them all. Once again, I would like to thank all of you taking time after a busy schedule on this Saturday afternoon for this webinar. Going on to the presentation, I would love to do this presentation in three parts. One, the current restoratives. Second, the newer alternative. And finally, to conclude, the clinical consideration. Now, moving on to the first part, the current restoratives. In this, we will see what are the current aspects of the restorative dentistry, what we are talking, and what are the materials that are available, and what are the limitations with those materials. Restorative dentistry basically tries to restore the lost tooth structure, which can be done by either the bonded restoration or the unbonded restoration. The bonded restorations are the adhesive dentistry brought about revolution in our dentistry called as a modern era of dentistry. When you're talking about unbonded restorations, it was primarily revolving around silver amalgam, and the cavity preparation played a major role. And if you ask me, it basically revolved around carious lesions. When carious lesions are there, we need to prepare a cavity and restore them. Then came a major revolution with regard to bonded dentistry. In bonded dentistry, there was a huge advantage that you could bond the restorative materials to the tooth structure and it would serve for long. So adhesive dentistry is a boon for us in a restorative world. But there are a lot of questions which revolve around them, because our dentistry has to be the problem-based dentistry, or in a short form, you should understand the situation and devise a beautiful success recipe. I would love to call that a success recipe, that is the treatment plan for that problem. If you blindly start giving treatment plans to all the situations, then our dentistry will not be a successful dentistry. So please understand the situation and accordingly give the solution. Now, when you talk about the solution for restorative dentistry, that is, we are losing tooth structure and we need to replace them. We are talking about direct restoratives. So what are the material options for us? The material options, we know that silver amalgam is there, and slowly later in the early 70s when Wilson and Kent introduced glass ionomer to us. Glass ionomer indeed had a lot of inherent deficiencies, which we are going to discuss that. So later on, metal modified glass ionomers and resin modified glass ionomers came into picture. Then came the beautiful composite resin, the adhesive dentistry. So now, how do we actually position our restorative materials? What I right now discussed with you is that we have the conventional ones, the quick and easy, I would like to call it, the glass ionomer and amalgam. Not much of work involved. That's why we call it quick and easy. And the next would be a high aesthetic, high grade restorative material called as composite, which is adhesive. So can we classify dentists like those who work on composites and those who work on silver amalgam and GIC? No, I cannot do that. Probably if you think me as a higher end dentist and this dentist as I practice only composite and oh go show no to GIC and amalgam. No, that cannot happen. That exactly what I'm trying to tell you is that the solution has to be problem based. So there are indications for GAC, there are indications for silver amalgam. You cannot tell that I'm done with GAC at all. So what are the deciding factors? The deciding factors are physical, chemical, and biological. Physical are the properties of the restorative materials what we are handling because they have to withstand the occlusal forces in which they come across during the lifetime of the restoration. The next would be the chemical. Chemical would be the solubility or any ion release or anything to do with that would be the chemical. Biological would be the tissue tolerance. Is it really tissue friendly? Is it biocompatible? So all the materials what we discussed have to have optimal properties with regard to physical, chemical, and biological. And a clinician, okay, this is probably tell, okay, this is all theory. As a clinician, what do you want me to do? The factors that has to be considered is that ease of use, longevity, and economic. Yes, definitely. Unrestricted means you cannot give a restricted materials and tell, okay, don't use for these situations, use it only for this. No, we want at least a broader segment of indications. It should be easy to use. You can't give, I'm giving you the best of the best material, but you have to do this, do that. No, everybody wants something easy to use, and at the same time, it should also have good clinical longevity. You can't tell that, oh, this is the best material. Okay, it will stay for 2 days. Nobody wants that. And more importantly, it cannot be the cost of a BMW, right? There are people who drive cycle also. So it should be for available for everybody on this planet Earth. Then coming on to each materials, first we would love to discuss on silver amalgam, then glass ionomer, then the composite. Silver amalgam, the indications, the limitations, and the hype I would call for toxicity. Coming on to the indications, actually, I love silver amalgam to be very frank. Why indeed, if you take up any examination or even the overseas examination, the first exercise should be a silver amalgam because that is when the dexterity of the dentist is seen there beautifully. But there are some limitations with regard to indications. And for me, Marzuk is a Bible. People who know me know that. Look at the indication where Marzuk tells that maintain the cavity width to 1/5 or 1/4 the intercuspal distance. So you cannot go beyond that. If you go beyond that, no silver amalgam. Not only Marzuk, we have the textbook of operative dentistry by Studivant, which also clearly tells that the isthmus width should be as narrow as possible, no wider than 1/4 the intercuspal distance. So beware, you cannot push your silver amalgam beyond that. If you do push that, this is what you would see, the fracture of the restoration happening at the margins, chipping off. Why? As I told you earlier, the physical properties do play a major role. Ultimately, what we are looking is onto the forces acting on the restoration. So there are plentiful forces acting on the restoration. Basically, we revolve around the compressive and the tensile force. Yes, why did silver amalgam last for 1 year, 150 years? Yes, because of the good physical properties. It had good compressive strength, but unfortunately, it lacked the tensile stress. That is where the limitation of indication came. That's why when compression and tension act together, you have the flexure happening. So if the flexural strength is not there, that material would not be a good material. You would not see such situations in the present day, but earlier people were trying to use that in the anterior also. So on coming on to the chemical point of view, the solubility of the silver amalgam, it would stain the tooth. We have all seen that. It would definitely stain the tooth. So definitely it has this disadvantage, and also I repeat, if not done properly, if the material is not of good quality, this is what would you see: corrosion and secondary caries. I don't even have to tell you, look at that picture. This is what happens. I repeat, not a good product, not a good technique would definitely result in this. Okay, this is with regard to the other indications and limitations. Coming on to actually the toxicity of silver amalgam. In fact, we are all heard about amalgam war 1, 2, people trying to push away silver amalgam, but it was not successful because it was proved beyond doubt that silver amalgam is not going to be toxic. But then why are we talking about an alternative to silver amalgam? There is a reason. The United Nations Environmental Program and the Minamata Convention had a big impact on dental industry. What is that? Is that there is going to be reduction of mercury worldwide. It is not the actual restoration that is going to cause any toxicity to us, but the minute you start to remove the restorations from the mouth, or there is mercury spillage, there is a lot of fumes of mercury that are coming up. These fumes are toxic, right? Another aspect also, if somebody dies and they have a lot of silver amalgam onto that, they are getting cremated. Imagine all the silver alloy is going to burn out and the whole atmosphere in that region is going to have mercury in them. That's bad. So actually the restoration is not poisonous, but other things revolving around the restoration are poisonous. So it's time to think. So there has to be usage of amalgam separator in all our clinical chairs, because though the production of mercury would stop, there would be a lot of people on this earth having silver amalgam restoration, and one day if you need to remove them, they will definitely cause fumes. So the near future is that mercury production is going to get stopped. That means, will we be able to use the silver amalgam? Are we ready for the phase down of silver amalgam? Like I told you, there are people who tell, oh my God, forget about silver amalgam. I don't use any silver amalgam. I'm a little surprised by the statement because I have a reason for that. There is a reason for everything. The next restorative material is glass enomer. Glass enomer is a white magic. People consider that because you fill it and forget it. But there are definitely indications of glass enomer, limitations of the glass enomer. The limitations are plentiful. Look at that. The physical properties. You cannot use glass enomer blindly in such huge restorations because they have a huge restriction there. The physical properties of glass enomer cannot be matched with that of the composite or silver amalgam. But unfortunately, I would tell that glass enomer is being misused in the oral cavity. When people do class 2 restorations, I go really mad because this is what will happen within 2 days. And sometimes, see what I was discussing a little earlier, silver amalgam beautifully fractures at the isthmus, and then people try to patch it up with GAC, and ultimately this is what will happen. So we are talking about physical property, the flexural strength. The compressive strength and flexural strength are two different entities. A compression happens when it's a closed cavity, a class 1. Okay, fine, there are limitations, but there has to be flexural strength when you're talking about class 2 cavities and one wall defect cavities. That's when compression and tension come together and it tends to flex the material. And if our material doesn't have the flexural strength, I don't have to explain what happens. You have seen the picture, what happens. So coming on to glass enomer, that is where the fault is. They do not have the physical properties that limits the indications. So you see the instructions of use by Fuji 9GP, it clearly states that do not use them in load bearing class 1 and class 2. I don't understand what this non-load bearing area of class 1 and class 2. That simply means that do not use them in class 1 and class 2. That's the simple meaning of it. More importantly, we all know the setting reaction of glass enomer, right? The loosely bound water and the tightly bound water. So you need to apply a coat of protection zone there so that you don't see such cracks. If these cracks develop, they would ultimately lead to the failure of a restorative. So when you're talking about predictable success of our restorations, we have to practice responsible dentistry. We cannot tell that I've done a restoration today, okay, go away, I don't bother what happens tomorrow. No, no, no. Today's dentistry has changed so much. We are talking about minimal intervention. We are talking about predictable success. You are supposed to give a beautiful treatment plan which will give a predictable success to the patient. And that is called as responsible dentistry. The minute we tell this, people feel that the only answer is composite resin. Oh my God. Yes, of course, I belong to the higher end aesthetic group wherein people think that I always do composite resin. No, composite has its own limitation. See, when I'm working on an upper tooth, right, upper molar, or even a lower second molar, the question of isolation is a huge thing. Accessibility, everything becomes difficult. Why do we have to struggle with composite? Can't we think about something simple? So it's not that people who do not use silver amalgam always use composite resin. This is a question I would love to ask when people talk to me that, hey, come on, you still use a silver amalgam? I don't use silver amalgam at all. I don't know what they use in certain situations like this. Look at that. I had a tough time taking a picture of this, an upper molar, where there was a class 1 cavity became a class 2 cavity, and ultimately the whole cusp, the buccal cusp got broke, the distobuccal cusp got broke. How are we going to restore this? Problem-based solution. Composite will not work here at all. Please understand. It is really difficult to restore with composite because I don't think I'm talking blindly. It's all evidence-based. When there is no KO surface enamel, the bonding is not as good as that. In a simple thing, I'll tell you. We are coming across a class 2 cavity, and the class 2 cavity does not have enamel in the gingival seat. It's a point blank no to me. Do not do composite. There are studies. Look at that. It clearly states that there is deterioration of marginal adaptation when the KO surface is dentine. Not one study. There are many studies which clearly tell that the micro leakage happens very less in if it's enamel. If it's dentine, it's high. And there's another study which they have evaluated below the CEJ 70 enamel junction, and all the groups had leakage. So practically, you might be talking about 10th generation bonding. Whatever the bonding is, the KO surface has to be enamel. Then what? Then what material am I going to use when I'm talking about longevity and predictable success? There are two things. The physical properties, that's what we've been discussing. The forces acting on the restoration, that primarily which revolves around resistance form and retention form, and the marginal integrity. The resistance form, beautifully given by G. Black, is the form and shape of the cavity which best enables the restoration and the tooth structure not to fracture from the occlusal loading. And the retention form is the form and shape of the cavity which best enables the restoration from lifting or tipping forces. What does it simply mean? That your restoration should serve long, having good physical properties. And next comes the marginal integrity, right? The marginal seal is very important. So first, all of us have understood that physical properties of a restoration plays a major role. And next, in composite, we saw the marginal integrity plays a major role, because when you're talking about predictable success, there should not be any secondary caries due to the micro leakage, which would happen in composite if the dentine margin is there at the KO surface. Marginal seal is very, very important. I have a small video, right? Imagine, do we construct houses with sand? No, we want strong materials to construct our house. We want a concrete. You don't want sand to be there because anybody, intruder, can break through. Then obviously we need some doors and windows to get into it. So look at this small video. A beautiful palace there, very awesome to look at. Everybody would love to live there. And then you enter through the windows and the doors. Yes, easy to understand. Those are the weak joints. The same thing, tooth is a solid and our materials have to be solid so that such intruders, when coming, they should not break. But where do the robbers come and break? Obviously the doors and the windows. The intruders coming to our house would come to the weakest joint. This simply applies to a restorative material also. Where does the bacteria want to go? Definitely they don't want to spoil the energy on the enamel. They would go there. Then what do we find now? We need some backup. We need some security. Then all the security zones come to us. to protect so that the intruders do not break open our margins and get into our house and rob away the beautiful pulp what we have. That's what we are looking at. So we are totally dependent on the security we have. So now let's move on to the tooth. Look at that beautiful marginal seal we have, and we have these red dangerous bacteria coming and attacking the restorative margins when the patient is off the office. So here we expect some stars to come and wipe away all that and have a green protection zone that's happening. So ion release plays a major role in the marginal seal. So going back, the factors to be considered. So unrestricted indication purely depends on the physical properties, ease of use, longevity, economic. All this a restorative material should have. Now amalgam is going to go off from us. One fine day, if somebody tell no amalgam, then what are people doing amalgam going to do? And I don't know what about people already not using amalgam, please using GAC or something which does not give predictable success. So a huge question mark is in front of us. What is the alternative? So this brings us to the end of the first part of our presentation with a huge question. We have landed in part number 1. Now going to part number 2, hoping that somebody could give us a newer alternative. Who's that somebody going to be? Somebody has already realized this. That is none other than Ivoclar Vivident. Ivoclar Vivident has introduced this new material called as Centyon N as an alternative to basic filling material. Why am I specifically talking about this product alone in this segment is that unfortunately I don't have any other product to compare in this segment. Today at present we have only Centyon N to be discussed in this regard. That is the reason the second part is purely going to revolve around what exactly these people from Ivoclar are trying to convey to restorative dentists like us. What are they trying to convey? Is that it is 100% volume replacement materials. That's exactly what they are telling. So what do they mean by that? So we discussed, if you remember, we discussed it should have good physical properties. Wow, look at that first point. Unrestricted class 1 and class 2. This is what we were looking at. Even silver amalgam could not do that to us. And it is a self-curing material and it has reduced application procedure. More importantly, it's an unbonded restoration that simply comes to our marginal seal, which I'll be discussing little extensively later, that it's no bonding. So I don't mind if my margins, my gingival teeth margins are in the dentine, like silver amalgam. So here, this slide seems to be promising when you're talking about the physical properties, the retention resistance form, and the marginal integrity for the predictable success. So what is this all about? Is it is powder liquid just like glass ionomer, which people love, and only difference, this is a composite. Going on to the actual contents or the composition, this has alkaline glass filler. Wow, what is that alkaline glass filler? That means will the composite going to release ion? Yes, it's going to release ion. The security forces for our house, the glass fillers are the security forces for our beautiful house, and the ytterbium fluoride gives beautiful radio opacity. And the minute we talk about composite, the only thing that comes to our mind is shrinkage. Yes, that to self-cure, people feel that it's going to shrink. No, there are beautiful shrinkage, patented shrinkage stress relievers and initiators and the alkaline properties. So these would be the properties of the filler particles which I discussed in the powder, the barium aluminum silicate glass which gives good strength. They are talking, let's see what strength they could offer us. The ytterbium fluoride, look at the radio opacity, beautiful radio opacity. I love radio opacity because when I take a radiograph and see my restoration material should be visible. I should know where my pulpal floor is, otherwise I will not be able to evaluate my success of my restoration. Then comes the isofiller, then our glass fillers which help in ion release. Now let's move on to the liquid part of it. The liquid part has all the monomers. These monomers are not the BGMA, HEMA, Another thing, they're basically the UDMA staff, and they are cross-linking methacrylates, which give excellent physical properties. Fine. We all know that composite has strength, so we don't have to discuss much. Yes, definitely they have a beautiful networking, polymerization happening, so that gives a beautiful strength. So this is the powder and the liquid composition. So let's see the powder and the liquid together. Now that's the powder and the liquid. And what am I talking? Dual cure? Just now I spoke self cure, and what is this slide telling? Dual cure. Yes. Luckily, this system can also be polymerized by light. But personally, okay, I'll discuss that on the clinical consideration. I would not want any dentist to, unless and otherwise in a very serious situation, do not show the light, let it sit on its own. There are certain indications wherein light becomes essential, especially isolation, because this material takes 4 minutes. Probably I'm doing a lower 7 and the saliva might immediately come inside, then you need to set it hard. So that time the light activation primarily attracts us to fasten the curing or the polymerization. So it's only optional, but please, my dear fellow dentists, don't get into the habit of immediately polymerizing every time with light. No. So coming on to the, again, the classification of material, present generation of classification of material, this Cention N is a composite variety available to as powder and liquid, and the category is alkazite. So it's an alkazite composite. Alkazite is a glass. Glass into composite is Cention N, and comes to the category of quick and easy. Wow, that attracts me also actually. Yeah, there are situations. I told you, no, problem-based dentistry. What do I mean by quick and easy? You dose, mix, fill, and finish. There are probably some dentists also thinking, I do that with my glass enamel also. Yes, you do that with your glass enamel also. But we forget that there is one step here, right? There is one step here which, before you fill, you are supposed to surface treat with glass enomer. How many of you actually do it? You're supposed to use a malic acid to remove the smear layer. Only then the so-called big advantage of glass enomer, the chemical adhesion, happens. Otherwise, chemical adhesion is a myth. How many of us do it? Huge question. Next is you fill it and you have to apply a protective layer, a varnish. If you do not apply a varnish, we already saw that you would develop micro cracks. So though we would be technically doing the same stuff with glass ionomer, but we are missing certain links. The puzzle links. If the puzzle link is not completed, there is no success. So please understand that this material is just promising us dose, mix, fill, and finish. Now going on to the first property, the physical property, right? It is telling that the flexural strength is 100 MPa. Wow, it is high off than the ISO standard 4049, which governs our physical properties of restorative materials. It's way off. So what exactly am I talking flexural strength? Flexural strength. Yes, it is important because we all know compression and tension. Okay, look at this picture. Compression happening, tension pulling away. When there is a limited space, the compression would act as a flexion where tension happens in between. A typical class 2 restoration at the isthmus area. So both compression and tension put together becomes your flexure. So that's how we test. I think my dear postgraduates listening to this webinar would know how we do that on the universal testing machine. We call them the 3-point bend test, wherein the restorative material is held in two places and the jig and the knife moves from above, and then we break the material and found out. What did they find out? What did this Ivocla guys find out? They found out that the flexural strength is way off compared to glass enamel. 110 is what they promise, provided why that small range is if you mix them properly, you get the best of the best physical properties. Now let's see compare the properties what I'm talking about, because physical properties are primarily important because we are problem based dentists. The forces acting on the restorations are very important. So look at that amalgam. No, transparency will not talk. We're not talking about high-end aesthetics. And coming on to flexural strength, in amalgam, it's not applicable because the tensile strength is very less. Whereas in GIC, it's 22. We don't even have to talk about it. In Centeon, it is 110. But what attracts the other physical property is in a class 1 cavity, wherein you have amalgam giving us 300, and Centeon also almost matching that silver amalgam. Wow, we have an alternative to silver amalgam now. Good. We are good going now. So far it's good. But glassy number again, it's 200. That's why they tell that do not use them in stress bearing areas. It's not a very good indication. The next is the security force for us. Yes, we need guards for our restorative materials when we are sleeping back at home. Yes, the silica glass, wow, they release, have a look, the fluoride ion, the calcium ion, and the hydroxyl ion. All these are getting released. Each has its own role to play. Let's see what happens. We all know acid is nothing but the hydrogen stuff which comes, right? The hydrogen which attacks all the margins. So hydrogen has to get neutralized only by hydroxide ion. Then you have the fluoride and the calcium which gets precipitated. We all know what term it is. It is remineralization. So acid neutralization happens and also remineralization happens. Wow, interesting. We are going good. Seems to be nice. So when I'm talking about acid attack, it's not necessarily from a line. It's just a pictorial representation there. Acid attacks, yeah, comes there, and we have the ion release happening. This beautiful formula will tell you what's happening. Hydroxyl ion coming from one side, that is from our security force, security guard, and then hydrogen ion coming there. They mixing and they get neutralized. Wow, our enemy is neutralized now. Yes, good, that sounds good. But what is the next thing? Is the remineralization effect. We also need a protective green zone so that nobody starts penetrating us. So we all know that enamel is made up of hydroxyapatite crystals, and when calcium and fluoride of these beautiful alkazite glass comes, that is the study which tells that over a period of time you have the calcium fluoride getting deposited. That's a microscopic image that happens, and that's where the picture showing you. So in a nutshell, ion release effect is very promising so far for us. The hydroxyl ion regulates the pH value, can prevent the demineralization. That's what we're looking at, security guards to our beautiful house that we are building up. And also the fluoride and the calcium helps in demineralization and thus remineralization. So it's important for us that these are very important so that they protect us. Now a question comes. Okay, a material keeps releasing, right? Will it weaken? Because each time they give something. So is it going to weaken? Come on, answer me. Is it going to weaken? So they have done a study on that also. Over a period of some time, they have tested the materials, fine, and they found out that it's constant over a period of 2 years. Fine, it's not lost any strength at all. So we are not going to lose anything. The answer is ion release does happen, but it does not weaken the material. Okay, we are not bothered about aesthetics much, right? Yes, we are talking about a replacement for silver amalgam, and in day-to-day dentistry, what is the alternative for us? Coming on to aesthetics, look at Centeon, and there it is almost invisible now when compared to other restorative materials like Fuginine GP and Kitak Molar. This is much more aesthetics. And if you remember the last point, what I tell, economy. Actually, yes, certain category economy is also important, that you can do so many fillings in this bottle. Yes, There are a category who require, especially when working in health centers and dental schools, wherein you see a lot of patients, charity hospitals. That is an important factor for us. Yes, right. So they found out that they can do 167 single tooth restoration. That's more than 100 in this bottle of 30 grams powder and 6 grams liquid. So the name Cention N sounds to be promising. The powder liquid filling alkasite composite material. The full form of the name is Cent, stands for 100 MPa flexural strength, and ion stands for the ion release. Cent is a Greek word, 100, and ion release put together becomes Cention N, and the flexural strength, lifelike appearance, and the ion release on demand, our security guards, right, makes the most of the difference for this material. So that brings us to the end of the second part. I think in this second part, the question which we had in the first part is getting answered, I guess, right? The material what we discussed, which Ivoclar is given to the world, seems to be promising. The question is now become an answer to us, but only thing, we are clinicians. We are not people testing in the laboratory. We work on patients. We need to know if this material is going to be clinically successful. So the final part of a presentation would be the clinical considerations. Coming on to the clinical considerations, I've been using this material since last September. Yes, and I'm happy. I'm happy, but there are few clinical tips. I would love to share them with you, because we know that always clinicians have a box full of secrets to share for the success recipe. So in this short period of time, whatever clinical secrets I could gather, I would love to share it with you. Fine. Now, if you remember the first part of our presentation, we spoke about understand the situation and give a problem-based solution. What exactly am I meaning? You are hearing me telling that quite often. Problem-based solution, predictable success, and responsible dentistry. Yes, it's important. We all responsible dentists giving predictable success for the treatment what you're doing. Shall I go to the example? There are a lot of materials. Going on to minimal intervention, it starts from fluoride application to our pit and fissure sealants, minimal intervention. Then we have our amalgam, our glass enomer, categories of glass enomer, then our composite, and now come to us is Cention N. Today, you can't tell that I've bought a box of Cention N because this guy in the webinar told Cention is good, and I will start using that every patient that drops into my office. No, that is not good. That is not what the treatment planning. Indications. If there is a small cavity, why do you want to dig a big hole and put Cention just because you want to use Cention? The answer would be a pit and fissure sealant if it's not cavitated at all. And if it is a very small cavity, then you can use any of your flowable composites and restore it. You don't have to dig a huge cavity just because you want to put a Cention there. So Cention also has its own indications. And also in anteriors, I cannot use Cention N because it is not aesthetics. When I'm talking about aesthetics, it goes to the composite. So it's a simple mantra, make your choices wisely, right? You might have an array of products with you. Yes, starting from fluoride to pit and fissure sealants, to glass enomer, to composite, to Cention. To which patient each thing fits in, please understand and make your choices wisely. So going on to the clinical consideration, we have these categories in which I would love to discuss. First is the indication, the cavity preparation, isolation and matrix placement, dispensing and mixing, handling, and then a final note on light curing. As I told you earlier, please don't get into the habit of light curing. Light curing is an option wherein in your hurry to cure the polymerize the restoration, because there is a lot of saliva coming in, only then you use it. Now let's move on to indications. Unrestricted indications. Wow, looks good. but that doesn't mean you compromise on the tooth. That's when in Studivant of Marzuk, when we read, it gives resistance form and retention form. Resistance form, if you remember the definition what I gave, it was the form and shape of the cavity which best enables the tooth and the restorative material to withstand the occlusal forces without breaking. That means it's not that you have a strong material, your tooth should also be strong enough to support. So retention, resistance. 80% can be the width of the cavity. Wow, good. At the same time, at least 1.5 to 2 mm of your remaining tooth structure has to be there. If it is missing, then it directly goes for cusp capping. Please remember, indications would be, if you remember the first slide, it was unrestricted class 1, class 2. Yes, but now please remember this. Yes, it holds good, but please consider your tooth structure also, right? It should have enough support to understand the resistance form. So if your tooth becomes narrower, 1.5 to 2 mm, please go ahead with cusp capping, and do not do that because your restoration will be there, but not your tooth. Both are important for us. Fine. So that brings us to cavity preparation. The cavity preparation, according to me, it has to be the same basic rules what we followed for silver amalgam, that is an occlusal convergence. Mechanical retention is primarily important because we are talking about unbonded restorations. So unbonded restoration in huge situations like this, a huge question marks come in front of you. Pulp protection. Oh my God, what do we do by pulp? It's composite, it would irritate pulp. Yes, in that case, please go ahead with the regular pulp protection protocol. Either use dical, calcium hydroxide, or biodentine, protect it, and then go ahead with your restoration. Will there be post-operative sensitivity? I would love to answer this question. In these short span of time, we had no patients reporting with the post-operative sensitivity because the smear layer is intact, right? And if you're not disturbed the smear layer, then no problem, right? It's not going to have any post-operative sensitivity. So pulp protection is there. You need to do pulp protection when you're talking about deeper cavities. And with regard to cavity preparation, I forgot to tell one point. We did come across one or two restorations which got debonded. Sorry, I'm not supposed to use the term debonded, which came out because the cavity preparation was not retentive. So the mantra is make a cavity preparation very retentive. Next, going on to isolation and matrix placement. I told you it's a quick and easy. That means I'm not talking about a rubber dam application or that. Do a good cheek retraction, cotton roll, suction tip, and then you go ahead because it's a quick and easy method, right? So this is exactly what you're seeing in the picture is what is sufficient. And coming on to matrix band application, in this short span of time what I've used this material, I would strongly suggest that if you have an option, please use a sectional matrix system for your class 2 cavities in comparison to your Toffel-Ware matrix system. So in short, the clinical application would be the cavity preparation. Look at that, a retentive cavity preparation, and then you dispense it, mix it, place it, finish it, and send the patient back home. The working time is completely 4 minutes from the start of mixing. So what is the tip I'm talking about here is, what is the most important point I would love to suggest is the mixing. Mixing is very, very important, right? It determines so many factors. So I would love to play a short video on mixing. Now look at that. We have the armamentarium, the spatula, and the scoop that given by the manufacturer, and the paper pad given by the manufacturer has to be used. Please make sure that you shake the bottle before you use, because all the filler particles of various densities, they may settle down. So please shake the bottle and take one scoop and then 1 drop of liquid, right? Gently slant the bottle, gently slant it, and then take 1 drop of, exactly 1 drop of liquid as you see in this video, and then start your mixing, right? Now when it comes to mixing, Do not incorporate the entire powder into the liquid. Just have half of the powder getting into this. Why? What is the reason is that the minute you try to incorporate the entire powder, you feel it's becoming flaky. Is it enough? Also, that's what the clinicians who spoke to me tell that. Now look at this video. Now itself, it's become thicker in consistency. Oh my God, do you want me to add a little more powder? Will it not become flaky? That's the doubt comes with everybody. And if you try to put everything in one shot, it gets flakier and flakier and flakier. So my dear dentist, please, mixing is very, very important, right? Slowly, little by little, add the powder onto it and then start mixing so that you will get one beautiful consistency. It would appear, should I stop here? Should I stop here is the question that comes to everybody. But no, look at this mix. It's getting thicker and thicker. Only then the physical properties would be there. So you have to mix them properly and then look at the consistency. It will be like you've taken the composite from the composite tube. You look at that beautiful consistency, the workable consistency, not dripping off, not too thick. Look at that in the spatula, and you take your plastic instrument and then take one scoop. Look at that. It's easily moldable, right? Then it's easy to take your plastic instrument and take the material off, ready to go there. Fine. So you saw how important mixing is. So we saw the physical properties are good enough, where all you can use Cention, how to prepare the cavity, how to isolate, how to place the matrix pan, and next comes the security. Yes, the margins. The minute we talk about margins, it becomes red in our mind. Oh my God, is somebody going to come and break open our doors? Yes, the ion release helps us here. Ion release makes our mind green. But there are people telling that, hey, come on, yeah, you're not bonding the restoration. Will there not be a gap? You're talking about an unbonded composite, and definitely there'll be a gap. Whereas in silver amalgam, there used to be corrosion products which would seal the margin more. No, that's funny actually. Corrosion products come only in low copper silver amalgam when gamma 2 phase is not eliminated. In a high copper, you have to essentially apply a cavity varnish. So corrosion product doesn't go with silver amalgam. So silver amalgam also had a margin there, right? So here also the question arises to dentists that, do marginal gaps lead to discoloration? Yes, 100% sure. Gaps associated with staining, but not with caries. These were the SEM pictures of Cention N without adhesive. You saw that 45 was the maximum marginal gap and 15 was the minimum. On an average, it was 20 microns was the gap. Now, look at my clinical picture. Beautiful marginal seal, right? It's actually at least 100 times magnified image. What you're seeing, I don't see any gap at all. So now the question is, do marginal gaps lead to marginal caries? I'm talking at a micron level because bacteria are microbes, right? Microns. The answer is no. Hey, come on. Don't talk crap. Talk science, evidence-based dentistry, because today's dentistry revolves around evidence-based. Now look at the articles or studies what I picked up for you. Effect of gap geometry on secondary caries, wall lesion development. Look at the conclusion of the study. It tells that they're talking about 500 microns, right, where the caries starts to develop. Another study also talking above 100 microns. And there is another study which is very, very interesting, wherein the test group is starting only at 50 micron. And I'm talking a gap, a maximum of 45, which doesn't even come to the first category of the group in that study. The 20 micron is not even there. So actually, at a micron level, we are talking in 100 microns. That's when exactly caries would develop, but probably marginal staining would happen, but definitely not caries. So physical properties, answer is yes. Marginal integrity, answer is yes. So we have to clinically see if this material is going to work. So there were some studies done by Ivocler, and I went through this clinical studies done in Turkey and Switzerland, and the results were quite promising in the short span of time, right? Of course, we need to agree that the clinical exposure of this material is not huge, but still this is a promising alternative to silver amalgam, a basic restorative material. At this juncture, I would love to, before winding up, I would love to show a couple of my cases, and also a short video how easy it becomes to use the Sention N. Look at this case wherein glass ionomer was used, and this patient reported to us with a fractured restoration, and we saw that the margin, you look at this is what I was talking, the margin, right? The gingival seed does not have enamel, so it's not wise to do a composite here, because at the seat area you will not be able to give a predictable success. And then we prepared a cavity for this patient, and then we saw that the gingival seat is not all that clear. So beautiful cavity, you saw the retentive cavity here, the occlusal convergence what we are talking about. And then we place the matrix band. Please remember, my tip here is that when you're doing a class 2, please use a sectional matrix system. This is what I found in this short span of time. And then you isolate it in a simple way, and then you restore it. Here is where the last point, you remember the light curing. So if you feel that some patients saliva just pools in immediately and you don't have the 4 minutes, remember please, the 4 minutes starts from the mixing time. It's not from the time when you place into the cavity. So that span of time you feel that it's too big for you, then please put your light, right? Why am I telling is that if in this lecture I start to tell that apply bonding agent, apply Sention, cure it, then what is the big difference between composite and this material? No. People who understand will understand, others will start misusing the product. When misusage of the product comes, people would start to blame a product, blame a procedure. That's not good at all. That is why all along this lecture, I never told about bonding. I never told about light curing. Please keep that in mind. Then immediately you see that, you check the occlusal interferences, and please take your burr and immediately finish it up, because like glass ionomer, we don't have to wait because there is no waiting period at all. So immediately you take your burr, check for any occlusal interferences and proceed further. Yeah, done. Then after a week's time, you check the patient. Now look at that, how beautifully it is integrated. I have a 6 months, sorry, not 6 months, 4 months follow-up of this patient, wherein beautifully integrated and going good. Yes, probably after 1 year, I will review them and give you more clinical tips for success story of this Sention, which is a perfect alternative for silver amalgam. Yes, look at this. There's also a huge cavity, and this one I'm showing you a 3-month follow-up after pulp protection, and then Sention was done, and that's immediate post-operative 1 week follow-up, and the image onto your right hand side most corner down image is the 3-month follow-up which I told you. Doing well, doing good. Yes, now I'd like to play a small clinical video in which I did a class 1, beautifully retracted, cavity prepared, and the material placed into position, right? Simple, easy. Yes, that's a class 1 cavity which you're talking about. And we start preparing the cavity, then my associate would be mixing the material for me, and then we place it and we fill it. Now I spoke so much about mixing, right? People might think that is the consistency what I'm thinking. I'm sure they might come with capsule Sention very soon, because not many could get this consistency. That's been I'm hearing from a lot of dentists that to get this consistency you should have good clinical expertise in mixing that. Okay, probably they will also come up with capsule, then it's same for all. You don't have to mix, your amalgamator would mix it. So don't worry, you don't have to throw the amalgamator. The amalgamator has a lot of purpose, even though amalgam is going to go away from our life very soon for the reasons what I discussed earlier. Look at that, carving it beautifully, and then checking for occlusal interferences immediately, and then we grind away all those occlusal interferences, and then the patient is all set with this new restorative material called Sention N. Yes. So, my dear fellow dentists, yes, that's me, my dear fellow dentists. Now it's time to, think before you do a diagnosis and treatment plan, what restorative material, where. So coming on to the final summary, yes, Sention N is a 2-component basic restorative material, powder and liquid. It's self-curing. Light curing is optional. Ion release, yes, the security guards for us are there, and permanent restorative material for all class 1 and class 2. Please remember the indications what I told you, the resistance and the retention form. The flexural strength is amazing. Aesthetics is also good. I'm not about to talk about aesthetics, but fortunately or unfortunately, aesthetics comes along with the package to us, and no bonding is required. It is, in short, quick and easy, right? In short, it's an alternative basic filling material. I hope all of you enjoyed this seminar. We are right on time. I hope I was able to give the small details which I knew about the small materials, and we discussed the larger perspective of the restorative world and day-to-day practice for every dentist. It's not that, oh, I'm a fast dentist, patient come and go to me. No, no, no. Every dentist has to think wisely and handle them beautifully. So I think, have some questions that popped up. So I would love to answer the questions, and I think we have another definitely another solid 5 minutes in front of us. So I would love to answer those questions. Probably there are a lot many questions. If I think I would try to, I would love to answer these questions for. So we'll move on to the first question. Anonymous. Difference between activa and sentient. Interesting. What is the difference between Cention and silver amalgam? I have a question. What is the difference between Cention and silver amalgam? Sorry. Cention and silver amalgam are almost the same, except that our Cention offers us Cention offers good flexural strength. That means my class 2 indications would not be restricted to 1/4 or the 1/5 of the intercuspal distance. So I can use it in larger cavities when compared to silver amalgam. My indications are plenty when using my silver amalgam. So that is the difference between a Cention and silver amalgam. And the next question is, the Cention also require remaining enamel. The next question was, does Cention also requires remaining enamel on the gingival seat? I think during the lecture you heard me tell that no problem. If also you saw my clinical picture, no problem if there is no enamel in the gingival seat. Dentine can be there because we are not talking about the bonded restoration. We are talking about an unbonded restoration. Then moving on to the next question. If we are filling 8 mm deep cavity and doing light cure, then what will be the difference between upper light cure material and lower sector material? Here is a nice question which tells that if you're going to do 8 mm deep cavity, first of all, there's not going to be any 8 mm deep cavity, then it is going to be root canal therapy. But still, if it's a huge cavity, will there be a difference in the depth of cure? When you light cure the uppermost surface and the downmost surface, the answer is no. The answer is no, because this is primarily a self-curing, and light curing is curing off or enhancing your work, shortening your working time. So light curing or no light curing doesn't make any difference. There would be, if you do the hardness test, because hardness test, you would get the same hardness in self-cured and the light cured material. Otherwise, the physical properties would, if the physical properties increase with light cure, I would have strongly suggested in this webinar, please light cure. No, don't light cure at all. The next question is, is the material having micromechanical bonding or mechanical? Okay, the question was, I think it popped up between the lecture session. Do we have to have a does it have a micromechanical bonding, or it's purely mechanical? The answer is purely mechanical. You saw that when I told the cavity has to have occlusal convergence, that simply means it's a retentive cavity.
What kind of cases you recommend with bond without box?
Okay, what kind of cases do I recommend with bond and what cases? Uh, Actually, for me, no. If I would bond, to be very giving a frank answer, I would use a composite, not Centionine, right? So, what case? Okay, coming to the part of the answer part of the question, what cases do I recommend bonding? Is that I told you that the cavity should have at least a millimeter, 1.5 mm thickness of the tooth structure. If I'm doing a cusp capping, then do bond it and then use it. Yes. So otherwise do not bond it unnecessarily. It's not necessary. Answer முடிச்சிட்டேன்ல. Question
Sir,
சொல்லுங்க.
please explain setting reaction.
Please explain the setting reaction. The setting reaction is none other than our simple polymerization reaction initiation, then polymerization, chain transfer, and termination of the reaction. The same thing how the composite sets, this also set. There is no difference at all.
Can it be used as a core buildup material?
Can it be used as a core buildup material? Good question. In fact, I've been doing that, but I didn't tell that because I don't want people to misuse this material. And the thing is, make sure that there's no huge wall defects when you're doing root canal therapy and using them as a core buildup material. Yes, you can use it, though the manufacturer's instruction does not give that. Please, personal experience, I've been using that, and you can use them as core buildup material. The question, can it be subgingival? The answer is yes, provided you're able to isolate it beautifully with a matrix band, right? So please, no problem, but make sure that you're able to isolate it because I don't want any salivary contamination happening there.
What is the strength difference in self-cure and light cure?
What is the strength difference between self-cure and light cure? I already answered that. There is no strength difference in light cure and self-cure. It is the same. Otherwise, I would have told you in clinical consideration, please do light cure restoration. So please think that um, you don't have to light cure at all. When
what do you have retention design? Then which bond do you?
What do you, when you don't have a retention design, what you have is that any of your dental adhesives can be used, but again, please make sure that the KO surface has enamel in it, right? That's the only key point. Otherwise, any of your dental adhesives can be used.
Failures happening in retentive cases also.
There is a dentist telling me that probably he or she is using Cention N, and failures have happened even when the cavity was retentive. I don't know what type of failure they came across. If it is the entire restoration popping out, I'm sure the cavity wouldn't have been retentive at all. If the restoration has fractured somewhere, so far it's not happened because 100 MPa is a big flexural strength. So I'm not sure of what type of failure this particular dentist is talking about. Mostly I would, the dentist whom I spoke told that the restoration came out as a whole. In that case, the cavity was not retentive. If it is fracturing, that means, I don't know, by mistake if you're given a bevel. I forgot to tell that you're not supposed to give a bevel, like same rule like silver amalgam holds good. How many? Good question. Shades. How many shades it is available? The next question is also the shades. It is presently available in A2 shade, right? So that is the only shade. Probably later on they might introduce A3 according to the necessities. Which one?
Which bond do you suggest for non-retentive?
I've already answered this question. Which bond do you suggest? And can dical be beneath for pulp capping? I think during my webinar I answered that. Yes, dical can be used. Also, biodentine can be used as a pulp capping agent. Can incremental layers be added? Good question. I forgot that. Thank you, whoever asked this question. Thank you so much. That if saliva is not contaminated, we always have this oxygen inhibitor layer, right? Like the composite. So that would bond. That's why the reason I tell that you also, after, though if you do not have any occlusal interferences, please finish, because they has a tendency to grab the stains. So after you do, probably I'll tell you a situation. There is no opposing tooth and you feel that why do you have to check the occlusion and grind it off? Yes, good, you're a good dentist, but please finish it up because there will be a lot of oxygen inhibition layer which would grab up stains. So please finish it and then you ask the patient to leave your office, right? So incremental layering can be done provided it is not contaminated with saliva.
How long fluoride release after mixing Centennial? Is it possible to recharge of Centennial?
How long does it happen? There are a lot of studies which has gone up to 2 years. It's happening because it's limited time that's available to us. And recharge, does it happen? Actually, recharge is a myth. Even in GAC, it's a myth. The recharging or the replenishing, the fluoride toothpaste or something, just the surface clinging happens. That's all. It actually doesn't. It's a one-way traffic. It could come inside, but it would not enter inside. If that is entering, also your microbes can enter. So recharging is actually a myth. And coming on to the last question.
What is the percentage of filler and matrix?
What is the percentage of the filler and the
Matrix in set Centennial.
in the set Centurion? It is that you saw me, I was talking a lot of powder particles there. So all those powder particles are already there in the set matrix. So we don't have any particular percentage. It's having ytterbium fluoride, it's having glass filler, it's having so many fillers. So everything is equally poised in that. And then all of them play the strength. I think this dentist is probably asking on the strength. The strength basically comes from the cross-linking of the polymers. I think, yes. I think that was the last question. And once again, I would love to thank you all for being there for this webinar on this beautiful Saturday evening. Here it is very hot in Chennai, the south of India. And once again, thank you so much.